going to be talking about a game played by Vishy Anand versus Veselin Topalov. The game was played in 2010. I believe it was during the World Champion match, Anand versus Topalov. And this was game 4, where Anand played white pieces and Topalov played black pieces. This will be preparation for the World Online School chess tournament that is happening in November or December, I believe. And I'm really excited to see how you guys perform, but it's really nice to have you here. Okay, so I believe this was, of course, game 4, and did a little bit of background research on the match. I really recommend you guys go and take a look at the match. But hi to everyone joining us in the chat, the whole match. The final result, I believe, was 6.5, 5.5, and that was in Anand's favor. Later on, Anand played Carlsen in 2013. I believe that's when Carlsen took the reins. But before that, Anand had been world champion for about 5 times, which is really, really impressive. He was uncontested for a couple years in the 2000s. And I really, really enjoyed this game because we're going to be discussing tactical motives. It was a very attacking game. I can definitely relate to this kind of style of play. In chess, you get 2 different styles, right? You get the tactical style and you get positional style. I'm pretty sure some of you find yourselves stuck somewhere in the middle, but I do believe all players, or most players, at least sway towards one side. If you're a positional player, it would be good to work on tactics more if you're a tactical player on positional play, because you always need to find that balance if you want to improve. But alright, so we're going to be discussing tactics today. I will stop at certain points during the game so that we can talk about it and you can give me some kind of suggestions. So I'm pretty excited. Alright, so this game took place in, or this match at least, in the capital of Bulgaria, Sofia. And yeah. So we're going to start the game. I hope all of you know who Vishy Anand is. He was, I'm going to try and get his birth date right without even checking any notes, alright? So he was born on the 11th of December, 1969, which makes him 50, turning 51 this year. So as you can see, chess is timeless and ageless. There's no way you can retire, or you can never become too old to play chess. That's what I'm basically trying to say. Okay, so let's begin the game. Alright, so the first move that was made is d4. Personally, I don't play d4, I play e4. They usually recommend e4 for tactical players. Although, don't be misled, d4 can lead to a lot of tactical positions too. So d4, and the most common response played is knight f6. And the reason I say it's most common is because it's very, very flexible. In a chess game, it's good to keep your options open. It's nice to keep your opponent guessing as well. With knight f6, pretty much any opening can happen. You can have the Slav, you can have the Grunfeld, you can have the King's Indian defense, the Queen's Indian defense, you can have the Benko Gambit. There's so many things that can happen. I'm not too sure if the Budapest Gambit counts here. You can have the Benoni. I don't really know any side gambits. I should really do some research on those sneaky side gambits that not everyone takes a look at, you know, and it's those quick little traps that your occasional club tournament you can catch your opponents out. So knight f6, like I said, is a very flexible open move and can allow so many possibilities. All right. Then we have c4. And I'm pretty sure that this is usually, let me get some color going. There we go. Central control, of course, Vichy is just wanting to control the center with the C pawn and the D pawn. Over here, black's usual response to try and counter the center, or at least get some control in the center as well, is to play something like e6, d5. I personally would not play a move like d5 right now, so let's make that move. d5. What is going on? Okay. Is it a sideline? Did I cancel my moves? Oh my goodness, I'll have to re-enter the game, but no problem. Okay, so the reason I wouldn't recommend d5 in this position is because of capturing. Now, yes, it's important to note that here white will have two central pawns left and black will only have one. But the main reason I don't like d5 immediately and would rather support the pawn on d5 by playing c6 or e6 first is because after knight takes, it would have a move like e4. And e4 pushes the knight back, it gains a tempo meaning time in terms of moves. So here you're opening the line for the bishop, so white would be able to develop the bishop in the next move, as well as gaining control of the center really quickly, and eventually being able to castle quickly too. And here with the move e6 beforehand, it definitely would have allowed the bishop to develop either to e7 or b4, for instance. And here black is pretty much forced backwards, and I think knight b6 is the main move here. Maybe it is an opening, but not often played, I suppose. Knight f6 would just lead to more space for white. Eventually white would want to play a move like e5, just to chase the knight again. But at the moment, these pawns are pretty strong on e4 and d4, controlling all four squares in the center. White just needs to be careful as to not push the pawns too early, because pushing a pawn, you can never put the pawn back where it was. Pawns cannot go backwards, and you really need to be careful when you push a pawn, because you're creating weaknesses constantly. By pushing e5, you're then allowing the square d5 to be controlled again by black, and black can simply play knight d5 again, and just kind of keeping a stronghold on that d4 pawn. It's a backward pawn then, so pawns next to each other, much more powerful. So going back to the position we had, the move before this, yes, there we go. So knight f6, and then c4 was played. All right, so after c4, I'm gonna have to go back to the notation. The game had disappeared, but no problem. Let's see. c4 and e6. Like I said, e6 would be supporting. Let's deal with this quickly. There we go. e6, supporting future d5, or perhaps even opening the door to the Nemzo Indian, which allows bishop b4 at some point. All right, so after e6, white plays knight f3. Let's make the move. Knight f3, a normal developing move, allowing either knight c3 next, e3, bishop g5. Also white is keeping his options open, and I believe even g3 is a possibility here for the Catalan. Alrighty, so after knight f3, we have d5 by black, exactly that, d5. Sometimes white captures here. It's normal to capture, capturing back. I believe there is a line, I'm trying to think. Is there a line like that? Oh no, I'm thinking of a different line. So the line I'm thinking about here is if knight c3, d5, and I've played this OTB a couple times where the knight would capture, and then e4, right? A lot of people suggest playing e takes d5. What do you prefer? Do you prefer e takes d5 or knight takes d5? And why the preference? So here I know it leads to a lot of drawish lines, but I'm quite comfortable with both nowadays. If knight takes, I played this one at the World Olympiad. It was against Morocco that we played, the team Morocco, and my opponent played e4, taking a lot of time. And usually OTB, it's very easy to tell whether your opponent is comfortable in a position just by judging the way they obviously behave in the position. If they're taking too long to move, chances are they don't know their theory. If they're getting a little uncomfortable, if they're shifting their posture or hand placements or something like this, means they're nervous and just are uncomfortable in such position. So there's a lot of psychology behind chess, I believe. Okay, so I believe you take here, and after capturing back c5. And then I think this is also pretty much drawish after something like knight f3. My opponent played d5, which I don't think is too accurate. But after, oops, knight f3, taking, and bishop b4, then bishop d2, and I feel like white has a slight edge, maybe. Neither, Benoni. You prefer the Benoni. Interesting. Okay. I feel like the Benoni gives up too much space. Don't you agree? Because Benoni allows for white to play d5 and just getting the pawns all up in black's territory, and I wouldn't feel too comfortable in that. Do you reposition your knight? Where does your knight go? What really happens there? Okay, coming back to the game. Okay, we had knight f3 instead. I will just have to deal with the position conflict that's happening. There we go. d5, then we had g3. And d takes c4. It does seem like a free pawn. It really does. I believe that white can simply or easily get the pawn back with queen a4, right? Just attacking the king and the pawn at the same time. After which, maybe, what is the move here? Bishop d7 is a move. I don't think knight c6 is a move. No. c6? Just a way to cover up the check. I wouldn't recommend queen d7, mainly because it blocks out the bishop, unless, of course, but I feel like the knight also could go to d7, so queen d7 looks a bit odd, and yeah, there's a way to get that pawn back, not even immediately. So Anand just played bishop g2 here, a simple move. g2, and Topalov decided to go for the check. Bishop b4 check, probably trying to gain a tempo just with check and a future castling. I believe black is always on the back foot in any given opening because they're always a move behind. Bishop d7 looks good to gain some tempos and develop after queen a4. Okay, I like it. So maybe bishop d7 for c6, right? Would you say that's good? Okay, bishop b4 check and bishop d2. So bishop d2, and of course here I don't think there was a capture. So after bishop d2 there was a5. And I really like this move. When I saw it, I was very tempted to say, but why not just play something like bishop takes? You would be doubling, have two sets of double pawns. So after capturing, you would force black to have two sets of double pawns, which looks kind of cool, but not so good for black. But then you realize maybe black has some advantages, or at least compensation for the double pawns. There's the open file for the rook, and now there's no longer a queen a4 for white. And also the pawns are kind of scary in this position. The pawns are quite far advanced, and they could cause a lot of havoc. They could wreak havoc in white's position. So you want to be careful. Right. So in this position, white played queen c2. I'm gonna have to figure chess 24 out. Okay. So queen c2, just developing the queen. I believe the queen is well placed here, mainly because there is no immediate attack by any minor piece. My only... I don't think there's a better square for the queen. If you play queen a4, there's also just bishop d7, so queen c2 seems fairly wise. And bishop takes bishop d2. Bishop takes bishop. It really motivates me looking at Grandmaster games, and in particular World Champion games, because you know they're playing at a high level, they put in months of preparation, if not longer than that, and you constantly see variations you haven't even thought about playing, or that you've ruled out after seeing that they exist, such as a d4, any form of d4, and the London, the Catalan. You know, I've even seen the Grunfeld, and I was completely repelled because maybe the ideas were too complicated or there was too much theory. Although when looking at these games, you kind of feel like, oh my gosh, that was so cool. I should start playing this opening. And it turns out being the best decision you've ever made. So you always have to approach chess with an open mind, and knowing that anything is possible. Hey, what's up? Good to see you guys in the chat. So nice to see you. All right. So after taking, once again, you're faced with a decision. And what's really cool is when you're facing over the board someone who you know is weaker than you or is lower rated, you always have to pose questions in a position. You have to make things complicated, because when they have to make a decision, a difficult decision where there are a lot of options, they tend to make the wrong one because maybe their positional understanding is not as good as yours. So in a position like this, I'm not saying both players, of course, are amazing, but I'm saying when you're OTB versus someone low rated than you, you don't want to make the exchanges really obvious for them to find, or just playing moves where natural developing moves come to them. They don't have to suffer, or they don't have to go into a deep think. You have to put them on edge every single move. That's why I really love Paul Morphy's game that we studied together in the last time I was here. So bishop takes d2, and what to play? Do you play... Oh, let's use the arrows. Do you play knight takes d2? Do you play queen takes d2? Do you take the other knight and capture d2? What happens? And my favorite method is process of elimination. So let's take a look at this knight first. Knight takes d2, knight f takes d2. Is it good? The problem with this move, I believe that knight is already developed, and also it's protecting a very important pawn on d4. If you move the knight, the queen could capture, and that already tells me it's not a good move. Next we have queen takes d2. Seems decent. Although you've already developed the queen, why would you move it again? What would you capture with here? Or would you take with a knight on b1? It hasn't yet been developed, but also, is that the best square for the knight? Would you not prefer it to be on c3? So it's between the two moves. Would you move the queen, or would you move the knight? And the answer here is, of course, the queen. Let's make the move. Queen takes d2, and the reason for this move is that, of course, the knight looks much, much better on c3, and that's where you want to place it. So even though the queen has developed a c2, it's okay. to move it again in this case. Even though in the opening you're not meant to move the same piece twice, there are exceptions all the time. Okay, so here we have c6 being played. c6, and I believe the main reason for c6 would be to play d5. You're thinking king takes d2? Oh my goodness. Are we having some trolling in the chat? See, king takes d2 was an option. My brain must have automatically ruled it out. King activity is so important, just not in the opening. In the opening, you have to get your king safe. Do not bring it out to the center. So if you're reading the chat, just do not pay any attention to queen takes d2, of course, was the answer. And then play rook d1, but that seems too hardcore. Yeah, pretty much. Okay, so c6 is for b5. b5 will just support the pawn on c4. Here black is simply a pawn up, but I would recommend not going to town trying to defend the c4 pawn, because if you put too much effort into protecting that pawn, you could be distracted and not develop well enough. You could end up being in a very bad position where protecting that pawn must be some kind of bait, and white will just go and attack the king. I've fallen into that trap way too many times. So what is one way we could stop black from playing b5? Although b5 is strong, and also how do we just put pressure on that b5 square? How to put pressure? Yes, the answer is a4. Now it may not stop b5, because what happens after b5? Here you can simply capture the pawn, and capturing back, although there's this X-ray vision on the diagonal, and that's really cool. The cool thing about the Catalan, and one of the reasons I really want to start playing it, I've played some versions of the English before, but mainly transposing to some kind of system like the Botvinnik setup, where you're playing c4, e4, and it just all comes naturally, but the knight goes to e2 and you're going for f4 and some quick attack. Theory is not my prowess, but it's really nice to look at Grandmaster games like this, like World Champion games to get you started on what kind of opening you're interested in playing. Alright, I would never have considered playing d4, but here the Catalan just looks so enticing that I wouldn't mind starting. He'll never beat MVL playing safe. c6, maybe also to shorten the bishop diagonal. I like that. I really like that. So here the suggestion was to kind of create a wall or blockade for the bishop, or limit the range of the bishop so that there isn't as much attack on the diagonal, and I agree. That bishop is potentially really strong. The knight may be in front of it for now, but it could be used later on, and you always have to think about what's coming next. So I really like that. Nice. The pawn up, but with weak dark squares. True. Is the Catalan a tactical or positional? That's a good question. It depends on... I would say both sides. I almost said it depends on black. Here black simply took on c4, kind of opening up the position. Before taking on c4, it was very static. Static meaning the pawns were not moving, and it was kind of positional at that point. But I believe after taking, it just opens up the position, and it could lead to a very tactical game. So it's a good question. It's a very good question there. Both, yeah. Alrighty, so a4 was played, and it was followed by b5. Oh my gosh, Topalov is brave and I admire their bravery. I really, really admire it. The next move, after a little bit of research, I saw that knight a3, played by Vichy. Position conflict. I don't like conflict. Resolving that conflict really quickly. Okay. So knight a3 was actually a novelty played by Anand. Not a normal move you would simply see, but it's nice to know that even after move, okay, it's only move 9, but positions like this are still studied and novelties are constantly being found. And I wonder how many books this position has appeared in. I'm pretty sure many, since it's a World Championship match game. I know there were several books written either about Vichy or maybe annotated by Vichy, but there was a book I checked out. I'm pretty sure it was a PDF because I was looking through my book rack. I've got about 100 chess books. I was looking through my book rack, looking for whether I have the book or not. But there was an interview conducted, and they spoke to Vichy's dad, and they were speaking about Vichy as a kid. And I know when Vichy was growing up, maybe there were those computers or like very early versions of, is it ChessBase or Fritz? Or I know Ripka is another old program, but they had those box computers. And there was a picture I saw, he was standing next to someone, but I can't remember who. Oh my goodness. I really wish I had an eidetic memory or photographic memory to remember these things. But it was really amazing looking back to see how a player has grown over the years. So knight a3 was a novelty, and here Topalov played bishop d7. In my opinion, honestly, I would have played bishop b7, only because I would have wanted to counter the diagonal. It makes me think, where does the rook go? Will the rook stay there? Will the rook go to c8, a7? Where's it best? Alrighty. Conflict and Topalov, never seen that. All 100 books are legally bought, of course. My paperback books are legally bought, of course. I hunt them down at antique stores, and I get them where they're like 90% marked off, where you get them for like $1 or $2. It's very nice. It's my favorite pastime, of course. Are these the websites? What? Bishop b7 must fail to some knight e5. An immediate knight e5? Let's see. Knight e5? Surely not. Is there a queen c7? Or queen b6? Or can't we just take on a4? Let's see queen c7. Oh no. The engine did not like that. And I have the engine on in my peripheral. It's really not my fault. Okay, so I'm pretty sure it would be bad in the long run. But perhaps Topalov was just trying to develop, and this is still theory. I'm 100% sure it was prepared. So bishop d7, and knight e5 was played anyway. Knight e5 was played, and just to expose that diagonal, that kind of x-ray vision on the rook and the pawn, I would definitely feel the flames, feel the pressure on the diagonal. The knight is well placed, and I can definitely commend Vichy for this position. Even though black is a pawn up, you have to know that material is not everything. I even saw a video, I think it was a commentary on the recent Legends tournament, and there was commentary by Jan was there, and Grishik was also there, and they were talking about material. I can't remember the quote. If someone has the quote for me, I'd love that. and he said something about ding and a material. I know that was there. It was hilarious. I was laughing. The commentators were laughing, and they were saying how Grishik is such a thug. We all know this. Okay, so material's not everything. Sometimes it's activity over material, or I would say all the time I would much prefer an active position and active pieces over a pawn or two pawns, because you're always going to find some kind of compensation. Yeah. Amazon also has used books. True. Unfortunately, if I were to order off of Amazon, it would take a month or 2 months for it to arrive, because all of it is coming from the US. B5 pawn is hanging, b6 is better. Queen b6 was better. Grishik is so thug life. Funniest chess player. True, and he doesn't even try. It's so natural for him. So of course here, very nice to note that the pawn on b5 is hanging, because once capturing the pawn on b5 is not possible to take back because of the pin on the rook. So I would assume that moving the rook or blocking the diagonal would be something that Veselin Topalov will play. I had the very, very big privilege of meeting Veselin in the 2016 Olympiad. I think I have a photo with him on my Instagram. What a flex. But it's amazing being able to meet your idols in person, especially at such an amazing tournament as well. So this is the move that is played. Yeah, so knight d5 was played just to block the diagonal. I really like this move because after a move like a takes b5, oh, I suppose this is why black decided to play bishop d7, because that pawn was hanging. That pawn was hanging the whole time, and now it's not possible for white to capture back because of the bishop. So instead of bishop b7, bishop d7, of course, it's just so obvious to defend on b5. All right, so after this, I don't believe it was captured. Let's see, e4 was played. I thought it would add new lines. Surely that is supposed to happen. "2016 was in Batumi." Yes, it was in Batumi in Azerbaijan. No, Baku. Batumi was 2018. Baku, Azerbaijan. That's where we met a lot of the top players, which was really cool. So e4, just kicking the knight off, also central control. And then what was played here? Yes, it was knight b4. And what I'd like to say about this position is that so many players, including myself, would feel inclined to just attack in the center right now, open the lines up, and I'd feel definitely that I'm well developed as white pieces. And here black still has to develop the knight on b8. So then a move like d5 would just come so naturally, right? d5 has to work in some capacity. But we have to be patient in chess sometimes. And the reason for that is king safety is of utmost importance. That's why we have the opening principles. We have control the center, develop your minor pieces, get the king safe. So, so, so important. And that's why here, white simply castles. Instead of playing d5, it's good to get your king safe. It's not a waste of a move, even though it may feel like you're not doing anything active in the position. You're connecting the rooks. Are we having the arrows? Yes, we are connecting the rooks. At some point those rooks will come to the center, or they will control some open files. And king safety is of utmost importance, because if you go ahead and attack and your king is not safe, even though you feel like you have a chance to checkmate the black king or your opposing king really quickly, it's not worth sacrificing that small move, which is castling. It will definitely help you in the long run. So castling, and black decides to castle as well. castle, castle, and here we have, of course, rook f to d1. And the reason for rook f d1 is just controlling the file. White knows that d5 is coming, black knows that d5 is coming, and let's take a look at this position. I would feel this is the beginning of those critical positions where we have to stop and evaluate the position for what it is, trying to improve the pieces, trying to see where we could attack, what's going to happen, etc. So let's start with black pieces. The knight and rook are not on their best squares. After castling, I think black's first priority would be to somehow find a good square for the knight. I don't know whether that is a6, c7, or just staying on b8 and moving the rook instead, moving the rook to a7. How would black deal with this disadvantage? And also, what would black's plan be now that black is a pawn up, and how is he planning to keep the pawn, if he is? Then we go to white pieces. White has just played an excellent move, rook d1, controlling the file. White, of course, is eyeing the d5 square. We also have to just keep an eye on the pieces in white's territory, of course. The outposted knight at b4. Outpost is a square that can mostly be occupied by an opposing piece, usually in your own territory or your opponent's territory. That is controlled by, of course, your opponent cannot be attacked by a pawn. There's no pawn on either file, adjacent file, to attack the knight. That knight not going anywhere. The only thing that can attack an outpost is a piece, a minor piece, a major piece, a king. Right. I'll keep in mind, where am I? You are watching co-chess at the moment. That is what you're doing. Why not on... I don't understand that question, Matt. Bragged about the photo during Jumra. Maybe castle is better. See, now that a king did not capture on d2, castling is way better. Reading the chat on Twitch. It's like white position, black pieces look weird. Yeah, black's pieces feel a little uncomfortable, but remember, even if you have badly placed pieces, it's not the end. You can always reposition them and find better squares for them. Maybe some bishop e8, f6, put it on h5, and some rook a7 to d7, knight d7, trade the knight on e5. I like that idea, bishop e8, especially trying to trade white's strong pieces. So for black, black needs to take their weak pieces and trade it for white's strong pieces. If we had to compare pieces such as, let's use blue, the knight on b8 for the knight on e5. This would be black's plan, of course. And white's plan would just be to attack, because right now they have better placed pieces. Except the knight on a3, but I'm pretty sure that the pressure on b5 and c4 compensate for the flank knight. So there's some pressure on those pawns, on those pieces. And here I would even say that white's bishop is better than black's bishop on d7. Because most of black's pawns are locked on light squares, making the dark squares weak, but also the pawns weak, because there's only one set of bishops and both of them are on light squares. What if the pawn break for black is e5 and c5? I was looking at c5, but could white then create a pass pawn on the d file? Is that a possibility? Okay. So we're going to go back after rook d1 and see what black played. Black indeed played bishop e8. Very good job. Bishop e8 was played in this position. But now we're going to stop. White is still down a pawn. Although we did discuss the activity of white's pieces, acting as compensation here. But there's still a great move for white to play. What does white play in this position? Do you have any idea? So I'm gonna wait for an answer. I agree. I definitely agree. What did we do now? There we go, we're back. Yes, d5 is in fact the move. It is the move. All right, so d5 was played by white. And now what? I would honestly think twice before playing d5 if I was playing white without as much positional understanding or calculation being done, mainly because, first of all, this might be a chance for black to undouble their pawns on the c-file, which might be my first concern. But after capturing, would that not just allow the activated pieces by white to do its thing, start attacking? And also we have to take advantage of the current situation of rook a8, knight b8. Knight c2 to try and get rid of the knight on b4. That's definitely an idea. Let's quickly go back and take a look at that. Knight c2, trying to attack the knight on b4, and it's true. In this particular position, it could be true that the knight on b4 is stronger than the knight on a3, mainly because this knight on b4 is in white's territory and is controlling quite a few squares in white's camp, and the knight on a3 is a bit flanked, and to bring it back it seems natural. It just seems like such a natural move. But perhaps white wanted to strike while the iron was hot and play d5 immediately, so maybe that is why he decided on d5. I'm pretty sure one of the candidate moves of white was to play knight c2. Yes. You swear you didn't see this game? Well, this game, after today, you will definitely know this game. The queen is unprotected on d8. True. Very nice to see that. Including d5. Yes. Alright, so d5 was the move. Of course, this move opens up so many lines in the center here, and also opens up some diagonals for that bishop. The bishop wants to have an open diagonal, is seeking some opportunity to get rid of that rook on a8. So I can see why d5 was played here. So why do you think opening up diagonals and files is going to benefit white here? And yes, we have answered that question, of course. So here, black decides to play queen to d6. Here just developing the queen, also planning on, well, attacking the knight first of all, and planning on just at some point moving the knight that's at b8. And I'm hoping the bishop as well, for black's sake, to connect the rooks. Connected rooks, of course, are very important. But how is white going to defend the knight? Or is white going to defend the knight? These are the real questions. Where's the knight going? BC, white has more active pieces. BC. BC, meaning because. To be honest, I was thinking B takes C. And that's chess brain right there. That is why opening the position favors... Yeah, it does. Opening the position will favor white, of course, because of the active rooks, queen, and pieces. So here, the move that was made was knight to g4, which I really like to see, because here there's so many potential ideas. There's stuff like queen g5, trying to attack on the king side. Usually in positions like this, black would want to control the queen side, trying to attack on the queen side, and white would want to attack on the king side. And they say that whoever controls the center also controls the game. No worries, I understood eventually. And here after queen g4, there are just so many things that can happen. There's knight f6 check, there's knight h6 check, and knight g4 is a very beautiful move. I like it. Okay. Queen c5 was played. Queen c5. And knight e3. Repositioning the knight. Not what I had in mind, but let's take a look. Why knight e3? So what is black doing with queen c5? Let's see. Queen c5. Protecting the extra pawn. Makes sense. Trying to gain control of the center. That makes sense as well. Over here. It's just protecting that extra pawn. This match was between Vichy Anand and Veselin Topalov in 2010. It was the world champion match where Vichy won 6.5 against 5.5. It was the 4th game. I thought it was the last game because I know they played 12 games, and obviously the game that wins the match is usually the most glorious. But this one is just so instructive and so tactical. That's why I really wanted to go through this one. Yeah. Yeah. Alright, so let's go back. Knight e3 was played. Let's get that hand. Knight e3, putting pressure, or of course on the center here. c5 and d5. And finally, black is developing. Knight a6. Here comes black's pieces, yes? D takes c6. Finally throwing fuel on the flame, if that's a saying. B takes a4, regaining another pawn, or at least now I think material wise black is still a pawn up. Just the structure of the pawns a little bit concerning. I suppose here black was under the impression that after bishop takes c6 he would definitely get rid of the control of the diagonal, at least challenge the bishop on g2 for the control of the diagonal, right? It's good to know that your rating is over 9,000. My personal rating is 9,200, so let's get that straight. I'm joking, of course. I really wish my rating was that high. Okay, so coming back to the position, knight a3 takes on c4. Finally, that knight makes it to the center, or at least away from the flank. We know that knight a3 was a novelty, and I'm pretty sure that Vichy was happy with the opportunity to finally get the knight back into the game, and now no longer has to worry about having to exchange it with the knight on b4. Maybe that knight looks really strong in white's camp at the moment, although it's not really doing much. It may be controlling a2, c2, and d3, although what does it really have to offer black at this stage? Okay, so going back, we have bishop takes, c6, rook c1 or knight takes c4. Exactly, knight takes c4 was was played. Good luck defending the pawn. Which pawn? Are you talking about the pawn at a4? Makes sense. And what move do you think was played in this position, guys? Once again, we're going to look at this position. It's now past the opening. We have controlled the center, developed our minor pieces now, and gotten the king safe. But now we have to look further. With the endgame, there's so many things happening that you have so many options. Do you move a piece? Do you attack a pawn? Do you make a one-move threat? Do you try for cheapos and hope your opponent doesn't see? We do not play hope chess. Chess is not about hoping your opponent doesn't see something, although it is very nice when your opponent falls for something that you set up. but you have to start thinking like a top player as well at some stage. And this includes attacking moves first. It also includes least active piece. So taking a piece that is doing nothing in a position and making it do something. So if you spot a piece in your position that isn't doing anything, it maybe doesn't have an immediate way of getting to a better square, but that's where we start strategizing. We look at the piece that doesn't have a good square, and we always dream up a square it would look good on and try to get it there. For instance, I'm going to make a very random example, is if you wanted this knight to be on g5, you're going to find a way to get it to g5. It might have to go to d2, f3, g5, then it means you have to move the queen on d2, and that's where it all starts. Now, I'm not saying the knight is the least active. I would think the knight on c4 is one of the most active pieces, but what would you play in this position? The pawn on a file, on the a file seems weak. True. Would you put pressure on that pawn? I offer my opponents chocolate, it always works. Don't offer your opponent food while they're thinking. They will complain. It's just not ethical. Maybe if it's your move and you really feel like sharing your chocolate, then you can offer your opponent. But other than that, I'm sorry. It's not a good idea. You're thinking about queen d6, but the question is, queen d6, is the queen the least active piece? I would beg to differ. The queen might actually be the most active piece. Active pieces in the position: the bishop on g2, the knight on e3, the knight on c4, the rook on d1, and the queen on d2. Leaving, of course, the rook on a1. Where does the rook go? Here the rook is attacking on a4. There's no immediate way for us to really put pressure or enough pressure on a4 for us to win it. But like I said, activity over material at this stage. We might be a pawn down, but we're not going to chase after that extra pawn yet. That weakness is not going anywhere. There's a big weakness on a4 and a5, double pawns, isolated pawns. Black has a lot of pieces chilling on the queen side. We do not want to interfere at that stage, okay. So we're going to play here, not rook a3, but rook c1. Rook a to c1, and it indirectly attacks the queen, puts pressure on the bishop. This is what we want. We want always to look for open files for our rooks. So here, the c file is open and the d file is open. There are other pieces on the file, but what makes an open file? An open file are lines on vertical lines on the chessboard that don't have any pawns on them. So that is what we're looking for. And that's why rook c1 makes for such a great move. Black plays h6, and a glorious move here by white, knight to d6. Knight d6 is attacking the queen, not the knight, but the rook. Behind the knight, discovery attack on the queen and putting pressure on the bishop. Feeling a little bit uneasy with the black pieces now. Also, the knight is quite a monster on d6. I would have felt a little uncomfortable playing knight d6, but that comes with maybe not understanding the position well enough. And here I would feel comfortable looking at it right now because there is e5. Let's get some arrows. There's the potential of e5. There's the potential of the other knight going to c4. And they usually call the knight on a square like this an octopus. And the reason for that is because it's controlling 8 squares. c8, e8, f7, f5, e4, c4, b5, and b7. All these squares under the attack of the knight. Another reason why we don't put the knight on the flank, because it would only control half those squares. Also, the queen on c7 is the most active piece. Oh, c5? Yeah. Okay, so knight d6. And how does black deal with this? Queen a7. Unfortunately, queen a7 was rendered an inaccuracy, by some kind of analysis. But what would white do in this position? So black does move his queen away from the attack, but it makes white's next move really, really tempting. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the black army and where are most of the pieces? And the question is, of course, so the question is, which side of the board are most of the pieces at this stage? Black's pieces. On the queen side. Exactly. Okay, so many times in chess, if your opponent is really strong on the one side of the board, then he's really weak on the other side. This is natural. If all the pieces are on the queen side, there's nothing defending the king or the king side. Then we have to take advantage of that, and white, of course, needs to make its way to the king side. How are we going to do that? So Anand played what? What did Anand play in this position? A kind of fancy, oh, you kind of fancy an exchange sack and then play e5? That is very fancy. But remember, even if you get the exchange sacrifice and you're playing e5, they might as well just take the pawn on e5 and give back the exchange. Then they 2 pawns up. Then what? Knight g4, I don't know. You gotta say knight g4 with confidence, you know? Because that's the answer, knight g4. Rook lift to c4. I like it. Less active piece. We're looking at pieces here that aren't really doing enough. So in this position, I would say that the rook is doing something, the rook and queen are doing something here on the d file as well. The bishop is still putting that indirect pressure on the diagonal, but the knight on e3, we're posing a question to that knight at this stage. So the knight on e3, of course, here is going to g4. We are going to bring our pieces over to the king side and see how black deals with this, right? I love it. It's getting really exciting now. Black plays rook d8. And now I'm going to stop again and ask you, what did white play? I think my app is going a bit wild. There we go. I mean, I would need to prepare it first. I know rook c6 don't kind of work, yeah, but I like it. I really, really like it. So we're gonna go back. Queen f4. I like queen f4, but you're gonna have to think a little bit deeper here. So the move, and I'm going to give you a hint, includes some forceful moves. What are forceful moves? I like to describe things in 3, so I'm going to use 3 points here, and in order of importance: checks, captures, and attacking moves. Checks, captures, and attacking moves, and that is so, so important. So we're going to look for the checks first. If there are no checks that work, captures. If there are no captures that work, attacking moves. Yes, that's what I want to see. That is what I want to see. All right. So the move is in fact knight takes h6, and the crowd goes wild. How to deal with a move like this? Black, of course, would need to exchange. What happens if black plays king h8? Then I think maybe, let's see. What do we play? Do we take on f7? Do we play queen g5? What do we play here? Queen g5? But anyway, black decided to capture on h6. And then, natural move here is taking back, of course, and f6. And the reason for f6, I would say, black wants to bring the queen, let's use an arrow. Black wants to open up the rank for the queen to control h7 and g7 and f7 and so on. So that's why f6 was played. So after a move like queen g6, black can simply just play queen g7, no problem. So here, what do you think white played? What do you think white played? It's a typical defensive maneuver. But after f6, what happens? What happens after f6? So the move that was played is e5. Oof. e5 was played. e5 and bishop takes bishop. Right. Now what do we do? What do you do? Do we play king takes g2? Or are we going to play something a little bit more active? What happens in this position? Is there a way to threaten mate? Bishop h3. Ah, instead of e5, there was bishop h3, sure. But now that they took the bishop on g2, what do we do? e5 buggers, yes, exactly. So, what do we play in this position? Rook d4, rook lift. Rook d4 would lead to queen takes d4, no? Yes? Maybe? I think. Rook c4. Queen g6. There's queen g6, but then queen g7, and I think it's... Maybe it's better for black, or it's a draw. Not sure. So queen g6, and it's much better for black. Black's a piece up after takes, takes, and takes. And black's a piece up. But here it's better for white. First e takes f. Yes! And we're gonna click something here. Okay. So we come back, and here e takes f is such a great move, right? So Anand does not care about that bishop. On g2, he's laser focused on the attack. But what would happen if black tried to save his pieces with something like bishop f3 here? So if he plays bishop f3, what does white play in this position? Let's see. think we have a mate somewhere, right? Surely. So we have queen g6, king h8. Queen g7 is not possible because the pawn is attacking on g7 as well. Then we have f7. And mate is coming on h6. How to stop it? So you can't even play queen e3. Or maybe queen takes f2 is your last hope. There's nothing to do. Can't even take here because knight takes and it's mate. Mate is coming somewhere. Or you have to sack the queen. I don't know. Probably. Right. So I have to go back. So saving the pieces is not an option here. And after taking on f6, what was played? Rook takes knight. We will really have to sort that out. Rook takes, and now what? Rook takes rook. Rook takes rook was played. Okay, playing some new moves. Rook takes rook was played. Bishop e4 and rook takes e6. Knight to d3. Rook c2, just defending. See how it's just do not hurry. Do not hurry is such an important concept. Something that I only learned when I was about 20 or 21. D and H, do not hurry in any position, especially endgames, although this is more of a tactical middle game than an endgame. It's where you do not need to rush your attack. Sometimes it's just better to defend and slow down, make sure, consolidate, make sure everything's okay. So rook c2, just kind of, if you play something like rook e7 trying to checkmate, it's not a good idea because this is checkmate on black's end. So you really have to keep an eye out for, you know, what your opponent's trying to do. Rook f1 I would not recommend, only because it's more passive. Rook c2 is perfectly fine. So rook c2 was played here, and queen h7 as a last resort, trying to defend. But here I'm going to stop. Really, I'm going to stop and wait for you to say, what does white play in this position? What does white play? What does white play? And this, of course, was a nice way to finish the game. One important trick in chess is to never relax too soon and never become complacent with any winning position. Especially, I've fallen prey to this just way too many times. Way too many times. It would have been... okay, I'm going to slow down. Queen takes f8. But if queen takes f8, king takes f8... let's see. Queen takes f8, king takes f8. Rook c8. King f7. I don't really... I think there's something easier. Don't make it more difficult than it needs to be. Jesse learned. Sure, I learned. Yes. Knight g4 earlier was correct. Did you miss your incorrect, your suggestion? Yes, I believe, who did Vishy play in the first round of Legends? Peter Fiddler, right? Queen f8, f7, yes. Exactly, f7 works. Very nice, very nice. f7 works, of course. Queen takes f7. Up to you again, what happens? So it would have been very tempting to capture the queen on h7 here for white. Coming back. h7. But you don't want to do that. You want to maintain the pressure. When you are putting your opponent under attack, you do not want to swap off pieces so soon. So queen takes f7, and then there's rook g6. The bishop will take the rook. There's a bishop. Those double isolated pawn beasts, they didn't go anywhere, and it's very nice to know that White didn't fixate on those pawns, because all of Black's pieces were on the queen side, but White focused on the main issue at hand. There were no pieces to defend the king side, and that's where he shifted his focus. And Black had to do the same, and now there are 0 pawns on the king side to defend Black, and yeah, there's just this amazing opportunity to win. So what is the move? What is the move? The move that was played here, queen g5, rook h6, is another option. Here, after queen g5, I think queen g7 would be played. And there's no rook g6 because of the bishop. So we just want to get rid of the bishop here, the matter at hand, getting rid of the bishop, and then playing... what did Black play here? Black played queen f5. Probably trying to stop the idea of rook g4, right? But then after rook e7, I would not say the flag has fallen, but Veselin resigned. What a beautiful game, I would say this was. Yeah. Well, he's 50 years old and he's still one of the best players in the world, and we're talking about Vishy Anand here. I think I've only seen or had the opportunity to meet Vishy once in my life, and that was in India when he appeared at the tournament 2017 in Delhi. Was it Delhi or Mumbai? Delhi. It must have been one of the two. Anand is a hero in India, and the explosion of popularity in chess in this giant country is in no small part because of him. Yeah, there's so many chess academies and chess players, underrated chess players in India. So if you ever want to play really strong chess tournaments and have very little chance of gaining some results or FIDE rating, play in India. I must say, they are incredibly underrated players, and a lot of strong players do, come from that country. So that's really, really cool. Yeah. But it was only dethroned in 2013 by Magnus. I know that I made, or there were a couple notes made here about Vichy. But I really hope you enjoyed the game, guys. It was exciting, and I mean, it's not often that you see some classical games being gone over. I don't know if you would consider this a classical game, but definitely a game or a match worth looking at. If you do some research, you can even find the match on like Wikipedia or ChessBase or C24. I'm pretty sure has a database as well. So that's really, really cool. Birthplace of chess. Where was chess created? Was it it birthed in India, 1600, but it was called something else, and they had 6 pieces on all 4 corners of the chessboard. I know there was some other version that existed first, and it was created to like entertain royalty and all of that. I know it's a royal game. And then when it got taken to Europe, that's when it became the chess we know today. But while it was in Asia, it was some different form of chess. In Persia, I watched Prince of Persia. 10 out of 10 for lecture. Thank you so much. Yeah, it was a pleasure being with you guys, and I really hope to see you soon. We will be focusing on future games and future concepts, and I'll definitely see you again. So I hope you enjoyed yourself, and yeah, see you again soon.